Okay, folks, we call the meeting to order. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director to tee up the purpose of today's meeting and how we're going to handle it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. We're gathered here today for an informational workshop on the PG&E Diablo Canyon Seismic Survey project. The goal of the meeting today is to achieve better understanding of the process and facts surrounding the project. One of the objectives today is to review and discuss the Department of Fish and Game's draft scientific collecting permit. Visitors need to sign in at the front desk for a visitor's pass, and bathrooms are down the main hall to the right once you go outside. We are not using speaker cards today, and instead we'll be asking speakers to line up along the left wall behind the podium when we call for speakers. We'll call you up one by one to the podium and ask that you state your name and any affiliation you might have. If you have handouts for the commissioners, please hand them to one of the staff, Anita or Mary, as you approach the podium. Each person will be allotted, Mr. President, how much time do you want to allot speakers? Or
yeah, we'll give them 3 minutes.
All right, 3 minutes. However, we are encouraging folks to use less time in the interest of efficiency. And with that, I think we can get started. So I first wanted to say this meeting was at the request of the Commission to gather more information from their August meeting in terms of the process and questions the Commissioners had. I want to emphasize this is kind of going to be an informal process we have various speakers giving us information, and I hope to encourage a open discussion and dialogue so we can get to the bottom of things. I think what we'll do is put our Director of Fish and Game, Chuck Bonham, on the spotlight to kind of give a little background from his point of view. Chuck, is that all right?
That's fine, Sonky. Thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Chuck Bonham. I'm the Director of the California Department of Fish and Game. And I thought what I could do real quickly is kind of give us a little bit of the procedural background on how we got here today, and then focus the conversation for the informal workshop. And I'll be joined during the conversation by a series of department staff, starting with our Marine kind of region acting director, Paul Hamdorf, and then depending on what part of the presentation, different technical staff. So just by way of procedural background, I think way back in May of 2001, you heard some public comment about the potential for this eventual project. And then in May of 2012 in Monterey, you actually took limited public comment about the topic. And then in June of 2012 up in Eureka, you received an informational presentation from the company about the project, and then I think limited public comments as well, and began to inquiry the department whether it could do a little further due diligence and continue to educate you about the topics. And then in our most recent meeting in August down in Ventura, you actually received several joint presentations, one from the department, then from the company and its consultants, and you also took public comment. And at that meeting, kind of in the middle of what was both a good exchange of information, but passionate discussion, you asked that the department go and think about working with commission staff to host a workshop. Not for action, not for approval, but rather to understand better these moving pieces. And that brings us here to today. So let me focus on a couple of things that are not in our presentation nor in our jurisdiction, really. And then tell you some of the steps we've taken between Ventura and now, and then ask for the department staff to go ahead and start presentations. So the department isn't here today to talk about power plant siting, nuclear energy issues. That's kind of not the department's jurisdiction. And in a real focused manner, it's also important to let you know that the marine mammals that relate to the project, whales, dolphins, seals, fall pretty squarely under the federal authorities under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So what the department has been focused on is something much narrower. The utility, as an applicant, will come to the department, has come to the department, seeking what we call a scientific collection permit, which is a permit that exists within the department's code. I think it's Fish and Game Code 1006. And if you look in Title 14, I think it's in our regs, Section 650 or 670 or both, that kind of cross-relate. And this is a permit that the department may issue for scientific collection that involves the take of a species. So the doing of the monitoring, the doing of the data collection, the doing of the science itself produces the impact, and that's the mechanism of this particular permit. So what we'll do today is have a series of presentations from the staff about the permits, about the background of the project, and then just make ourselves available for questions. Just make sure I've covered everything I'd like. Between Ventura and now, we've done a few additional steps. We actually had many of our staff get on the phone with Dr. Popper of the University of Maryland. He's the co-dean of the Center for Comparative and Evolutionary Biology of Hearing. And as it turns out, we learned from Dr. Popper kind of the science around acoustic testing and hearing impacts to fish and larvae is an emerging science. We've also been talking a lot to our federal counterpoints at the Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service to track how they, as the primary lead, are focusing on the sea otter component. Then we've also asked our oil spill prevention response unit of OSPR, which is our part of the department that kind of runs our Marine Wildlife Veterinary Care and Research Center and is an expert on otters, to be interfacing with our federal agencies. Our federal agencies counterparts, as I understand it, haven't yet issued, but are very much down the field in developing a permit approach to those marine mammals, including the otters. We've been looking at some draft stranding response and adaptive management proposal ideas. And with that, I think I would just turn to our staff to kind of walk you through a few presentations and let you have any questions for me personally.
Just one.
And
You got a
quickly,
question?
if I could just add, prior to our focus on our individual scientific collection permit, you may know that the State Lands Commission has certified an environmental impact report for the project and done their due diligence, and that subsequent to the department and this commission, the Coastal Commission will also be looking at approvals under the coastal management authorities it has.
Commissioner Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Director Bonham, for your opening comments. I do think it's important that we start this for the benefit of the public by recognizing a couple things. First of all, that PG&E is under a statutory obligation to conduct this project. 2006 nuclear safety law passed by the legislature mandates that the utilities that are operating these two nuclear plants in California find out more about the faults underlying them. Stands to reason. As a resident of the Central Coast, nuclear safety is important. The other thing I think that's important to recognize is that the department is not the lead agency here. This project, in order to move forward, will need, I suppose, dozens of permits from federal and state agencies. And the department's just one of those. The lead agency, as I understand it, is the State Lands Commission, not the department. So we, the department and the commission, we are supporting actors here. We're not the lead agencies at all. In fact, the commission, we're sitting here in an advisory role to the department. The department has the authority. You, as director, have the authority to issue this permit under regulations promulgated by our commission. So we can't tell you a permit or not, as I understand it, and that's, I think, important for people to realize. I don't know how many agencies are involved here from the state perspective, but it's a lot, and this is a complex issue. We're going to hear a lot more about the science and the policy of this issue today, but as I understand it as well, our overriding concern is to make sure that we don't sacrifice marine reserves and marine life at the altar of nuclear safety. That's our job, is to safeguard wildlife, marine and terrestrial, in California, and to help the department in accomplishing that mission. So that's our specific interest in this issue, is what impacts, if any, is this project going to have on marine wildlife as it's conducted. So that's the lens through which we will be looking at this issue today.
With that, Director, we're ready for your speakers.
So I'll just ask, I'm not quite sure our staff order for presentations.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting the State Lands Commission staff to give a presentation. My name is Jennifer DeLeon. I am an environmental program manager with the California State Lands Commission, and I was the project manager for the environmental impact report for this project. And I've come today with a little PowerPoint slide presentation responsive to the Commission's invitation to us to give an overview of the State Lands Commission's role in the process for this project, our permitting authority, and our environmental impact report process. So I've prepared this in a format where I first give a brief overview of the actual process that we went through, receiving the application, all of the public and agency coordination, public review process, and then delve into a little bit more of the actual environmental impact report, the EIR development, and then finally the State Lands Commission's decision on approval of the permit. So that's how I structured that for you today. Okay. So just as a brief summary of the process, the State Lands Commission staff received an application from PG&E for a geophysical survey permit in April of 2011. The State Lands Commission is given authority under Public Resources Code Section 6826 to issue geophysical survey permits. The State Lands Commission is the sovereign over sovereign submerged tidal lands and pursuant to the public trust doctrine. So we received the application, and that basically started a process under which we determine how to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, how to balance the often competing or conflicting directives of the public trust doctrine, and complete the permitting process and the environmental review process in 1 year as required by CEQA. So first we had to make a couple of determinations. The first was that an EIR would be required, and the second that we were the appropriate lead agency. Once we made that decision and responded to PG&E's application, we began the process of the environmental investigation. And the three key things that we undertook in developing the full to meet our disclosure and analysis obligations under CEQA were to gather as much available scientific information as we could for the project and determine if any other information, project-specific information, was needed. So literature search. We did project-specific modeling. It involved other agencies, outreach to them, requesting data that they might have, and then also involving the public, both organizations, nonprofits, fishing organizations, and then the local community. So on the agency consultation aspect, we've had informal consultation with Department of Fish and Game, Marine Region staff ongoing since 2010 and actually even before that, because of a related but separate project that PG&E had applied for, which was the Ocean Bottom Seismometer project, which is more of a passive recording type project where they place structures on the seafloor, also involving marine protected areas. But we knew that this one was also coming next, so we wanted to reach out early to Fish and Game staff. We've, over the past 2 years, utilized their expertise in getting catch data, requesting an independent review of some information that we had received in the application, and also requesting their advice and guidance on how to approach the marine protected area conflicts issue. We received comments from Department of Fish and Game and Coastal Commission when we initially, last summer, published a notice of preparation on the EIR. And that notice basically asked parties to comment on what issues should we cover, what types of mitigation would be appropriate, what alternatives would they like us to look at, and any other relevant information. So that would give us the scope of the EIR and an opportunity to bring up any issues that maybe we didn't think of. And so we did receive a letter from Fish and Game on the notice of preparation. We also convened an interagency meeting on September 13th of last year, where we had basically all of the agencies that we expected would be responsible agencies or subsequent permitting agencies. The Corps, Fish and Wildlife Service, National Marine Fisheries Service, Fish and Game, Coastal Commission, everybody. We wanted to really try to cast as broad of a net as possible. It also included the local ports and harbor districts. We then subsequently developed and published the draft EIR. We had that out for a 45-day comment period last spring, began in April and closed on May 3rd. We received a formal comment letter from Fish and Game, from Fish and Wildlife Service, and from National Marine Fisheries Service on the draft EIR, along with Coastal Commission. And subsequent to that, we've from that time to the commission hearing in August, we conducted additional dialogue and data requests and coordination with Fish and Game. Particularly, I know it's important to this body, particularly on the fish monitoring study that was requested to be developed. On the public involvement side, again, we had a scoping period last summer in July and August. We held 2 public meetings in San Luis Obispo. There was, again, a 45-day public review period on the draft EIR. You can see that we received a large number of comments, 86 written comment letters from governmental and non-governmental and individuals, and those represented over 700 individual comments. In April of this year, we conducted 2 public meetings, again in San Luis Obispo, on the draft EIR. 49 speakers provided testimony, from fishermen to chambers of commerce to concerned citizens, individuals. It was really across the board. Between that time and this summer, we worked on responding to comments, incorporating changes into the EIR. We published the final EIR in late July of this year. And then between, on 2 dates, our commission meeting carried over from August 14th to August 20th because of the efforts to make sure that everybody who wanted to speak could speak. So there ended up being over 5 hours of discussion and public testimony over those 2 dates in front of the State Lands Commission. And on the 14th, the commissioners determined that it was appropriate to certify the environmental impact report, but they held over a decision on the permit to August 20th, received more public comment, and then made a decision at that time on the meeting on the 20th to approve the permit.
I got a question. You, at the April meeting, you mentioned 49 speakers from the public, and then in August you said 5 hours of testimony. You have a number of how many people showed up for that public testimony by any chance?
I don't have the count for the number of speakers at the commission meeting, unfortunately. It was probably in the around 50. And we had set up both in person in Sacramento where the meeting was held, and then these gentlemen here also set up a remote site in Morro Bay, I believe, and provided a Skype video feed so that the local community could also provide comment without traveling.
Yeah, thank you.
So, into the actual project itself. That was an overview of the process and then the project itself and the EIR development. You've heard this a bunch of times. I think you're pretty familiar with the project itself, but I wanted to illustrate the layout of the project. The purpose of the project is to obtain the deep subsurface imaging of the faults, their direction, their angle, and the connectivity. So this slide illustrates the different zones that was in the original. This is in the original proposal by PG&E that was the proposed project in the EIR. So you can see from this slide also the little dash line is this state limit, and then that also that in the originally proposed project there were 2 marine protected areas involved. In developing the EIR, we approached it to really truly meet our obligations under CEQA to disclose and analyze all the information that we could. We conducted a comprehensive and thorough search and review for effects of seismic surveys by looking at seismic literature, experiments, monitoring reports from prior surveys. We looked at involving local community members who maybe wanted to speak on their memories of things from the 60s, 70s, 80s. So we followed up with people who spoke at the scoping meeting that said that they remembered things, and then we reviewed all the available literature. And some of that literature is in experimental laboratory settings. There's not, it is, I think that you guys know this from the prior meetings, but it's important to state again that the information that we gathered over 25 separate scientific papers regarding how a seismic survey might affect fish, fish larvae, fish eggs, invertebrates, and other marine creatures was in that experimental laboratory setting, or then off of monitoring reports from surveys in other parts of the world. There has not been a survey done off the coast of California in this specific area in state waters for many, many, many years. So we didn't have any direct evidence. So we looked at what does the weight of the scientific literature tell us that we can infer from that information. The second step was to gather area-specific data for species, a species presence, types, density, abundance, seasonal distribution. Then we plugged that into a project-specific modeling effort. We had 2 models run for that. We had noise modeling experts that looked at water depth, water bottom, seafloor type, whether it was soft or rocky, direction of the pulses, how sound travels through water, and they made some maps of how far away from the seismic source would the sound attenuate. That was then laid over some modeling of marine mammal and marine organism density and distribution by Brandon Southall and SMRU were the 2 subcontractors on that, both globally renowned and very well respected entities. So once we had that, we could then look at what the scientific literature and the project-specific modeling would tell us to give us a reasonable proxy for inferring what the likely effects of this would be. One of the things that I wanted to make sure I mentioned here today as well was that the environmental impact report that we prepared took a dual approach for quantifying what is in quotation marks there as takes. So the takes for marine mammals are take as it's defined under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And they have two levels of what they call take. There's an injury take level and there's a disturbance take level. So when we say takes, we're not necessarily discussing it as it's defined in the Fish and Game Code, Section 86. So there is takes under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. That simply means that you've disturbed the animal, that you've made it change direction or not come into an area that it might otherwise want to come into. So I wanted to make sure that I made that distinction. The National Marine Fisheries Service level for disturbance is 160 decibels. For injury is 180 decibels. So we laid over the marine mammal modeling and the sound modeling to try to come up with some quantified numbers. So at the end of the day, we let the data drive the story. We looked at several potentially significant impacts as required under CEQA. We had the potential for the noise impacts to fish. There was also potential impacts to terrestrial species. There's an onshore component. Noise impacts to marine mammals, conflicts with marine protected areas, and then impacts to commercial and recreational fishing. So the reason those last three are in red is because we determined through our EIR analysis that even after application of all feasible measures to avoid or reduce the impact that was in our jurisdiction to control, those impacts remained significant and unavoidable. Mitigation measures included ramp up of the air gun, meaning you don't just get the ship out there and start blasting away. They have a procedure to start small, try to encourage animals to leave the area, because what we found was that distance is the most determining factor in whether or not an animal is injured. The farther away it is, the less likely it is to be injured. There would be pre-project aerial surveys for marine mammals, marine mammal observers as directed by the National Marine Fisheries Service as well in their permitting, the establishment of exclusion zones, shutdowns and power downs if marine mammals are sighted within those areas, and then a very detailed communication plan to try to address some of the impacts that would be experienced by commercial recreational fishers, divers, etc. Additionally, not one of the requirements of the environmental impact report, but additionally PG&E is working on other monitoring and research programs at the request of other agencies, including the Department of Fish and Game. So, the decision. The Commission certified the EIR on August 14th. What that decision, all that decision did was basically say, we feel that we've put out a document that complies with the procedural and substantive requirements of the Act, of the Environmental Quality Act. On August 20th, they approved a combined alternative. What this did was eliminate Zone 3, which was the northernmost zone, also by doing so eliminating potential conflicts with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary and that northernmost marine protected area. They restricted the project activities to the November-December time period to try to continue to minimize impacts to migrating whales and other marine life, and phase the survey over 2 years. And lastly, as part of their requirements on project approval, they adopted CEQA findings and a statement of overriding considerations for the unavoidable impacts basically making a statement that the benefit of the project would outweigh, that they had to consider that the benefits of the project outweighs the unavoidable adverse consequences on the environment. And then, as was stated before, many, many other agencies still need to give their approval for this project before it can proceed. So I've listed a few of them here just for a little snapshot of what needs to happen. I understand that National Marine Fisheries Service and Fish and Wildlife Service are still engaged in the incidental harassment authorization process, and the Coastal Commission has their decision on, I believe, the 10th of October. So that's where we're at. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
Commissioner Rogers.
Good morning. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. I have a very specific question for you. We've received, as you know, recently, which was this information was not involved in your process, but we received information very recently that suggests very specifically that the project is not necessary. You probably have heard some of these questions. Let me read something from an NRDC Ocean Conservancy letter, which you no doubt have read. It was directed to the chair of the Coastal Commission. And one of the key points, and there are a million key points, but I want to understand where you guys are on this, since you certified the EIR as saying the benefits outweigh the costs. We have found no conclusive evidence that the information from the seismic survey is either essential for assessing earthquake risk at the plant or likely to result in improvements in plant safety. And they go on to explain that, showing graphs of the build of the plant and all of the movements of the plate, etc. How do you guys respond to that?
Well, first of all, it's important for me to say that I can't speak for the commissioners themselves.
Of course.
I can only speak for staff. So you're right, we did not have that particular letter from the NRDC at the time that the commission made its decision. During the environmental review process and up to the hearing on approval, the commission was briefed on a few occasions by members of NRDC and the Ocean Conservancy. They also attended the hearing, the approval hearing, and provided public testimony, and there was quite a bit of back and forth discussion with them at that time. In fact, the concept of the restricted timing in the phase survey was put forth originally by NRDC. In terms of whether or not it's absolutely a necessary survey, I can just tell you that from the State Lands Commission perspective, we received an application. We're required to respond to it. So we prepared the required environmental documentation for that, and staff put that in front of the commission itself for a decision.
I understand.
And that decision was...
I understand, Ms. DeLeon. You explained that. If I may, Mr. President, continue. Yeah, continue. You did explain that. But your statement was that the benefits outweigh the impacts. You have allowed us how, and I think most everyone in this room would agree, there are substantive impacts,
yes,
perhaps even profound impacts, and not just to marine mammals, etc. So your statement is the benefits of the specific project outweigh the impact, but are you answering my question as to whether the benefits of the project are real?
That was the commission's determination, yes. Staff along the way advised.
And they based that upon, did they look at the plate movement curves and the strength of the vessels and all of that?
Staff
did they do
consulted along the way with members of the independent peer review panel that was organized and convened by the CPUC as part of their decision to approve funds to conduct the study, and it was their advice that it was essential information to be gained.
Okay, so your staff then disagrees with the NRDC and the Ocean Conservancy's letter?
I'll have my division chief answer that.
Commissioner, that's just an opinion from...
Oh, it's exactly what I'm trying to get. I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand that, exactly. I understand that's an opinion. I'm not suggesting this is fact.
Commissioner, my name is Cy Oggins. I'm Chief of the Division of Environmental Planning and Management of the California State Lands Commission, and Curtis Fossum, our Executive Officer, apologizes for being unable to attend. However, I'm representing him, and Jennifer is perfectly competent to speak for our agency as well. We relied heavily on an independent peer review panel, as Jennifer said, that it consists of members of the California Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, the Seismic Safety Commission, the Coastal Commission, and even Supervisor Bruce Gibson of the San Luis Obispo County. So they were under Public Utilities Commission directive. They were formed to identify the seismic hazards related to the proposed survey. In addition, at the Commission meeting in August, we received testimony from both the PUC and the Energy Commission stressing the need for this project. The information that you have in front of you was not submitted to the State Lands Commission. We did not even see any of that information at the August meeting. I don't know the date of that meeting, but I believe it is after August 20th. Okay. So we have no knowledge of that letter, and it just wasn't available to us.
Well, we just received it as well.
Correct.
It was sort of a bolt out of the blue, frankly.
And at the time of the meeting, as I said, we did have NRDC support. Matter of fact, the Commission went above and beyond to accommodate the comments of the NRDC at that meeting in August.
Yeah, please understand, I'm raising the question. I'm not suggesting this has any efficacy whatsoever. I'm raising the question as to, because they question the issue of benefit.
Yeah. Mr. President.
Commissioner Sun.
Thank you. And I just want to follow up the question from Commissioner Rogers. I think the issue here for us is really two assumptions that are being made here about this project that we're questioning because we don't have the experience you do, having looked at it in detail. One is that this project is necessary to satisfy the statutory mandate of the Blakesley's bill. And second, that this high-energy 3D imaging technology that PG&E is proposing to use is the only way to get that information, right? Now, we don't know whether either of those assumptions is valid. Is the project really necessary to satisfy the statutory mandate? We don't have any way of assessing that independently, and you all have been there, and we're just curious. Secondly, and I've asked this before, is this 3D imaging technology the only way to get the necessary information, or is there less invasive means? I understand that Southern California Edison down at San Onofre is proposing a somewhat different technology, lower energy synthetic aperture. I don't know the technology involved, but apparently there are alternatives. And if there are, and if there are alternatives, especially that are less lethal or impactful, maybe we should explore them. Maybe that's already been done. We don't know, and so forgive our naive questions.
When the Commission certified the environmental impact report, it did assess that the EIR did evaluate a range of reasonable alternatives. You mentioned the Southern California Edison project. That is totally in federal waters. We do not even have an application yet for that project. So there's no way that we can even analyze what they're proposing in that project. In terms of the reasonable alternatives, again, as Jennifer mentioned, we had extensive scoping meetings to try to get various alternatives. We had prepared a draft EIR, which evaluated a range of alternatives. No comments were received at all at that time on the types of technologies that were proposed. We did receive comments later from Supervisor Bruce Gibson at the public meeting, at a point where the Commission did have to weigh its mandate to complete EIRs in 1 year, if at all possible. So at that time of the meeting, the Commission made the decision that we had evaluated a range of reasonable alternatives. Now, this permit that the Commission issued clearly states that PG&E must obtain all permits from other agencies. So if the Fish and Game feels that they don't have the proper technology for impacting marine protected areas, that's the Fish and Game's decision, and our Commission, of course, would not allow that project to go forth in the MPA. Same with the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission denies the coastal development permit in state waters, the project cannot go forward. So where the Commission was at its August meeting, evaluated first the EIR, certified that it was that it could be certified. Second, when they approved the project, they did make the decision that the need for the at-depth to collect the at-depth data, if they did not approve the project, that need would be unmet. And they're very concerned about the implications for public safety in the event of, a Fukushima scale event. That was the information the Commission had at its time at the August meeting.
I think Chuck wanted to respond too, Richard, but I just, before you do, Chuck, I want to make sure that we all have an understanding of exactly what's going on here. We're having this meeting for informational purposes, not only for the public but for us as well. And obviously, there's a whole bunch of state and federal agencies that have been involved in the decision-making process up to now. And I'd like to just get a response from our legal counsel about some of the things that I want to understand clearer, and maybe the rest of the Commission as well. After we listen to everything that we got to hear, and we decide we don't like what's going on, our only option is to go to the department, Chuck Bonham, and say, we would like to see you withdraw the permit that you issued for this project. Other than that, and he could say yes or no, and then he says no, and we have no authority to do anything. On the Lands Commission's EIR approval, it said that the Commission had to authorize for use of the MPA. Would we have the authority to withdraw our authorization for the use of the MPA from this project and say that that project is being done inside the MPA, Marine Protected Area? My question is, through that vehicle, would we have the authority to do something if we didn't like what we saw, even though the EIR has already been approved and everything? Just for information's sake, I'm curious as to what we gather all this information for nothing, or is there something we can do with it? So, Mr. Legal Counsel, could you do that before you respond, Chuck?
I think the most straightforward answer I can give you is that you have recommendation ability. You can advise the department what your position is with respect to the project after you've heard whatever you want to hear on that. The department is not obligated to take your advice with regard to their permit authority. You don't have permit authority over the project or any element of it, so you can't in any capacity put your foot down and say no, it doesn't go forward from our point of view. You can advise the department, but there is no area where the Commission has legal authority to intervene and say yea or nay on the project. Is that clear?
I already understood all that, but I wanted it to be on the record so everybody understands what you just said. Thanks. So, Commissioner Rogers, you let's let Chuck go first. Okay.
So, just a couple of things. The next agenda item, I think, is presentations from department staff about authority, scope, work to date. I'd also thank State Lands Commission staff, Jennifer, Division Chief, for coming to an entirely different commission, not the one it works for, to kind of provide information and field questions. It's a great professional courtesy, and we appreciate you doing that. The Department of Fish and Game hasn't issued a permit, and the only permit we're talking about is, remember, that scientific collecting permit, because we received an application. Otherwise, I don't believe we're exercising or claiming to exercise permit authority over the project. There are two things in the State Land Commission's project approval that are responsive to the department's May 18th, 2012 letter, which I believe you have in your information packet. It's like a 13-page letter. The first is the narrowing of the project footprint. So as I understand it, originally the project would have touched, 3 or 4 marine protected areas. And the narrowing, which was a request of our department, along with others, kind of took the White Rock and the Cambria protected areas out of play. And while not defending it still is a reduced footprint limited to the Point Bouchon protected area. And then secondly, our comment letter, May 23rd, had a fair amount of information about our concern and commitment to commercial and recreational fishing, and talked about the longer the study time frame on a monthly basis, the greater the chance of substantial impact. And you now see the project being shrunk basically to just 1 month, the month of November. While your council may tell you you have advisory and recommendation authority here, as director I can tell you I take that seriously. We have a very close relationship, the commission and the department, in fact, as one in many things, so it matters to me, the commission's advice. And I think the purpose of today is to get any such advice as we then continue working on potential draft terms of a permit. And like the State Lands Commission, any permit we issue will be contingent on strict compliance with all other state and federal permits.
Commissioner Rogers, you can go ahead with your question now.
Well, Director Bonham, as he often does, stole a little bit of my thunder. I wanted to really congratulate State Lands for coming here. We are perhaps because of the importance of this, both in terms of nuclear safety, but also in terms of the viability of a very important ecosystem for us, marine ecosystem. We're getting unprecedented conversations and cooperation, both from State Lands and the Coastal Commission, and we are really enjoying that. Our staff is enjoying it. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact, Ms. DeLeon, that you used to work with Fish and Game, if I remember correctly. Isn't that right?
Only for 18 years.
Only for 18 years. So you were a bit of a rookie. I see. Yes. Okay. Anyway, so I want to really congratulate the other agencies for being here. Having said that, for me, and this is what I'm seeking today, there are information with respect to so that I can inform my own opinion as to whether it carries weight with the director. That is for the director to determine. All right, and that is, one, is the project necessary, which is what I touched on before. Just touched on. Because there seems to be now, whether you had this information at the time you were making your judgment or not, there seems to be question as to whether or not that is a necessary item. We understand that the project has been, the study has been mandated by law. We haven't got that part. Okay. So in other words, the methodology, that's the one thing. And the second thing, which you touched on just relatively briefly, and that is the issue of cost, the issue of the substantive damages and take, if you will, however you want to measure it, to the ecosystem. My understanding of this, and correct me, Mr. DeLeon, if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that the information that we have, the studies that have been done all over the world at 250 dB plus, don't exist. That there's very little, if any, information at 250 dB plus. Is that correct or not? And if it is not correct, what are those studies that show what is the damage to marine organisms now and in the future? Has there been any studies done at that level?
I believe that the ship that PG&E is proposing to use for this project, the lead agency under the National Act is the National Science Foundation, and the Langseth is operated by the National Science Foundation and Lamont Doherty, I believe, Columbia University. So they do use this ship with this array in other investigations quite commonly. The findings in the EIR that we prepared are consistent with the findings in other environmental documents that have come out, including the OEIS, the Overseas Environmental Impact Statement, also prepared in 2011. On the question of the scientific experiments and the noise level generated, I don't have the entire list of those scientific papers that were reviewed, but the cannons on this are 3,300 cubic inches, I think. It's 3,300. Some of the experiments were less than that. Some of them exposed fish or fish larvae to magnitude to higher than that. I believe there was one that was over a 4,000 array. So we did investigate.
What dB does that equate to? Do you know?
I don't know, but I'm thinking that the higher the cubic inches, the higher the sound magnitude it generates.
I don't know. A Chevy small block can sometimes outdo a big block, but that's all right.
So, in terms of I don't know the answer to your question specifically.
I know, and
anything that has ever
I know,
been
and I don't mean to
know.
cast any aspersions at all. That is what we're wrestling with here. In other words, what the lay person, and you're getting a lot of lay people weighing in on this. I mean, we're getting a lot of letters, as you can imagine. The lay person says, okay, well, how do they do this terrestrially? Well, they blow off dynamite. I don't know if anybody's ever been in the water when somebody was dynamite fishing, but there's a person in this audience who has been in the water when somebody is dynamite fishing in the Philippines and other places, and it can be miles away and you feel it, right? The impact of a 250 dB, as you know, I'm sure you know this, the theoretical maximum dB in air, because air compresses, is 197. So therefore, the Hiroshima nuclear blast was 197 dB. And as you know, dB is geometric. Every dB doubles. If you're familiar with all this. You must be familiar with dB, or else you wouldn't have authorized the EIS.
A logarithmic
So
scale,
in any event, what we're talking about here, because water will not compress, as you know, it's hydraulic. So therefore, the shock wave that is going to be going down from these cannons into the benthic habitat is a very different type of pressure than it is in the air, because air compresses. All right, you've probably gone to school on this. So what we've got to think about here is the difference between. I mean, if we let off, according to the police departments that we've talked to, if you let off a stun grenade in this room, which is 138 dB, everyone will be on the floor and they'll be bleeding. So the question is, at least this commissioner, has got to understand, and from the public testimony and from all the people involved here, is what does that mean?
Okay, we got it.
Commissioner Rogers? Commissioner Rogers, can I go back to your question on the need for the project? First of all, the EIR clearly stated that the Commission felt, when it certified the EIR, that there were significant unavoidable impacts to marine mammals, to the marine protected areas that's under your jurisdiction, to commercial recreational fishing. The Commission, when it adopted its statement of overriding considerations, was well aware of those impacts. The Commission strongly felt that there was a need for the project. In fact, the statement of override, if I could quote, says, therefore, if the geophysical survey permit was not granted, the need for at-depth data will be unmet. Further, the ability to better assess the potential for a Fukushima-scale event would also be unmet, and the implications for public safety, particularly in the immediate project area, could be devastating. Therefore, the Commission strongly felt that there was a need for the project, and it would not have adopted this statement of overriding considerations unless it felt so.
Okay.
No, I thoroughly appreciate that, and I'm not calling to question the efficacy of your process. Please understand, I am not. I don't mean to imply that in any way. The fact that Fukushima was built at sea level by the people who invented the word tsunami is a little weird, all by itself.
If I could also just respond to Commissioner Sutton quickly. You asked a question on how many people testified in August
I
at
did.
our commission meetings, Commissioner Chair. Sorry. We had 40 speakers at the August 14th meeting who filled out speaker slips and spoke.
Yeah, that was on the deal.
And we had 41 at the August 20th meeting, so a total of 81 speakers spoke at both commission meetings.
Thank you. Okay, I want to thank the State Lands Commission for being here, and Jennifer did a great job. And I think we can move after I hear from Commissioner Sutton. We'll move forward with Chuck's folks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just now that we've established that the project is necessary, I guess my second question still stands, and maybe the department can help address it, and that is, or PG&E, and that is whether this particular high-energy 3D imaging technology is the only way to get the information that is needed. If it is, that's fine. We can deal with that, and you've gone through all the permitting requirements and some mitigation and so forth, and we appreciate that. But the question still stands. Nobody has told me whether there are alternative technologies by which we can obtain the necessary information, the deep that's needed. I understand that the low-energy two-dimensional imaging isn't sufficient, and the geophysicists would like to know more. But the question is, with all of the range of technology available to us, can't we find a way that's less impactful to wildlife to use that would get us the needed information? That's my question on the table.
Director Bonham? Okay, we can hear from you. I think we're done with the Lands Commission for now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And Commissioner Sutton, I hope we'll learn more as we hear more of the speakers relative to your question and others. So with that, the department may proceed.
I think, Eric?